Hey everybody, it's almost time. Time to roll out Waypoints Go, the next step in the Waypoints faith community's journey. So excited, starting in 3, 2, 1.
I want you to think through your day. Think back to waking up this morning. And think about all the time that you spend preparing. Not just preparing for your day, but all the activities that fill your day. Maybe you start your day making a cup of coffee. You get the grounds, or if you're like me, you grind your own beans. You fill the coffee pot at the sink. You start brewing, and while you wait, you grab your cup. You get milk or cream or maybe some sugar. Then you finally get your cup of coffee, and then you drink it. Maybe it takes 10 or 15 minutes to prepare, and you drink it down in 5 minutes. It took you twice as long to prepare that cup of coffee than it did to consume it. Did we miss something important in the preparation? In many of our activities, it takes longer to prepare something than it does to participate in it. Spend some time just thinking about your day. Think about the time that you spend preparing. One of the best examples is cooking a meal. Think about all the time that goes in to preparing a meal. Everything from running to the store to get the ingredients, to setting the table to eat, and everything in between. Time that's spent preparing. It takes significantly longer to prepare a meal than it does to eat it. And we do it multiple times a day. The book of the Bible, called Mark, starts this way. In Mark chapter 1, verse 1 through 3, it says this: "This is the good news about Jesus the Messiah, the Son of God. It began just as the prophet Isaiah had written. Look, I'm sending my messenger ahead of you, and he will prepare your way. He is a voice shouting in the wilderness, prepare the way for the Lord's coming. Clear the road for him." Mark doesn't start with Jesus. It starts with preparing the way for Jesus. Our days are filled with preparing for something, and oftentimes more time and energy is spent on the preparation, but we rush through that part to get to the main event. We prepare without being present in the preparation. So what might God want to teach us in the preparation? Perhaps we can embrace the preparation. And when we do that, maybe God can enter into that time with us and prepare us in the process.
Today we're going to begin an in-depth look at the Gospel of Mark. Now, the author is Mark, but he's more commonly referred to as John Mark throughout the New Testament. He is not part of the inner 12. However, he's extremely important to spreading the gospel throughout the Mediterranean early on. Now, John Mark is also the cousin of Barnabas, and he was a traveling companion of Paul, but he's more like a disciple of Peter. In fact, many scholars believe that Peter is speaking this gospel to Mark, and Mark is simply writing it down. So this gospel is heavily influenced by the personal account of Peter. And so some refer to this as the gospel according to Peter. And it's most likely the first of the four gospels written. Now, Peter and Mark were extremely close. In fact, Peter refers to John Mark as his son in his letters, but they're not biologically related. Mark's gospel is very different than the other three gospels. That's because John Mark's focus, his purpose, is telling people without a Jewish background about Jesus. So his writing is very simple, it's more to the point, there's not a whole lot of fluff, and he focuses more on what Jesus did rather than what he said. And in the gospel, Jesus is very busy and he quickly moves from one event to the other. And we see him busy doing the work that God needs him to do as God's Messiah. Therefore, there is a minimum amount of discussion and a maximum amount of deeds. And so it is a great book. Now, every great story has a beginning. And as Mark begins his story of the gospel, remember the word gospel simply means good news. It is the good news concerning Jesus. And Mark chooses to begin his message of the good news, not with Jesus' birth, but with the announcement that the good news will have a messenger before the Messiah. The good news that God has for humanity. And so Mark actually begins by quoting the Old Testament prophet Isaiah. Now, Isaiah is a prophet in Israel about 700 years before the birth of Jesus. And Isaiah is speaking on behalf of God when he declares, "I will send my messenger ahead of you, who will prepare your way. A voice of one calling in the desert, prepare the way of the Lord, make straight paths for him." Now, Isaiah is prophesying that long before the Messiah comes, there will be someone announcing him, someone telling everyone that the Messiah is coming, prepare the way, get ready. Someone whose job it is to help prepare the hearts of the people. Now, this is so culturally important because Israel has not had a prophetic voice in hundreds of years. God had not sent them a prophet for about 500 years, maybe 400 years. God had not sent them a prophet. And many people believe that was because God had nothing left to say. So when this messenger arrives on the scene, it's extremely important. And he's showing the people that that is not the case at all. In fact, God has his most important news for them right now. Now, any great work of God begins with great preparation. And I think we often fail to realize how much preparation goes into something, like a great meal. We just see the finished product, but there is a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes. And that's important, right? That things be prepared exactly right, otherwise you're not going to enjoy them. Now, when Mark writes his gospel, he writes it in the Greek language. And the original Greek word for paths is the word tribos, which means beaten down pathway. See, it's not just any path that a bunch of people follow. It describes a difficult path, a hard path, that God has beaten down a path to you, to us, so that we can be made right with him, that God has been preparing for you to come to him. He has been working behind the scenes. He has been beating down a path to make your way clear to get to him. The important part is that God is pursuing us, that God is initiating a relationship with us. See, it's important to realize that you and I don't have a relationship with God because of anything that we did. It's because of everything that he did. And that's the good news, that you can't mess this up, that you cannot out-sin God's love, that he is the one pursuing you. I think that's extremely important to John Mark and to Peter because both of them failed. And they failed very publicly, and it's recorded in the pages of the New Testament. If you remember, Mark was such a failure in ministry that Paul refused to allow him to go on his missionary journeys with him. That's a bad mess up. We also know Peter's mess up because he failed by denying Jesus 3 times. This failure didn't stop God from moving into their lives. It's true. The gospel, and in the true form of the gospel, it's about forgiveness and being used by God. And this is exactly what happened to these two men. That's the heart of the message of the gospel. That God had prepared for both of them to be ready for him to appear. And God has prepared you, just like this meal, making you ready for him to arrive as well.
You and I are sitting at a perfect moment in history. And honestly, we need to be ready for it. Not only do we need to be ready for it, but we actually have a role to play in it. Much like preparing a meal, God is preparing the way for something new. We're sitting at something new. It's a lot of hard work and a little bit of planning, but you have to gather the groceries and you have to make the plan, and what gets made first, you can't just start with the rolls too early because then they're going to be cold, and nobody wants to pass around cold rolls at the family meal. We all want to sit down and have nice, hot, fresh rolls. They need to be steaming right out of the basket when you pass it around. And then honestly, in a lot of ways, God has prepared humanity just the same way when he timed out sending his son. It was perfectly timed and planned for thousands of years. And then just at the right time, God begins to clear this path between humanity and himself. And John the Baptist in our story began to prepare the hearts and the minds in his culture for Jesus, just for this time, preparing for something to change, preparing for lives to be transformed, preparing a way for something new, all the while clearing brush and overgrowth and exposing a story that's long been forgotten. You and I, we have a choice to make when it comes to this story God's telling. We can wait for him to do something, or we can get involved and be part of the plan. And the part of the plan that we have is honestly to blaze a path forward. We have unique connections with things going on around us and in our lives, and specifically in our culture and our local community. Through connections we have with others or organizations, we sit at the exact right place to prepare a way for something new. Through our influence and conversations we have and the services we bring to areas inside of our community, you are actually being the hands and the feet of Jesus. Now, you don't have to proclaim in the wilderness like John the Baptist did, and thank God we don't have to eat bugs either, like he did. But the only thing that you and I have to do is be present and be open for what the Holy Spirit has. And in order to understand this preparation, we need to understand expectation. Expectation and preparation, see, they go hand in hand. Like sitting at a great meal, we expect that the plate's going to have some food on it. We're prepared for it. We didn't go out and eat a Big Mac on our way to the meal. No, we purposely paced ourselves so we could experience this meal. See, preparation and expectation go hand in hand. In fact, you cannot have preparation without expectation. The expectation is we're hungry, we're only getting hungrier, and while you're waiting for the best meal of your life, you're prepared for it because you're expecting something better. Take farming. James says this, "Dear brothers and sisters, be patient as you wait for the Lord's return. Consider the farmers who patiently wait for the rains to fall, and in the spring, they eagerly look to the valuable harvest to ripen, and you too must be patient. So take courage, for the coming of the Lord is near. James is saying that the farmer is waiting patiently for the rains and the harvest to be at the exact right time. When a farmer waits, he's just not sitting around for something to happen. He's preparing for a harvest. He's making a plan. Even though the harvest is not guaranteed, he is actively doing his part. And you and I need to prepare for God to do his part. Preparation follows expectation. Whatever you've been waiting on God to do you really expect him to do it? So what are you expecting God to do? Are you waiting for physical or emotional healing? Or maybe you're waiting for a relationship that's been broken to be restored. But whatever it is, are you expecting God to move? And then the next question I have for you is, are you prepared for God to do something in those areas of your life? Or are you just waiting for him to do something? Are you preparing a way between yourself and God? Are you preparing a way between humanity and him connecting with us? So what do you think? Let's talk about it.